Well, get it started.
Hello, whiskey taste buds. We're here again for a campfire whiskey review. I'm Adam. This is Greg with Blue Collar Scholar Whiskey Pairing. And what better whiskey to pair with a campfire than Islay Peat Monster? And today we have just that. Today we have an Octomore 10.4 Virgin Oak. Octomore is a super heavily peated expression from Bruichladdich Distillery on the south tip of Islay. They're known as the Progressive Hebridean Distillery, and the reason for that is as old farm distilleries go, they're sort of one of the newer ones. I think they were established in the 1800s.
But mothballed.
But mothballed at one point in history and reopened.
They're the outlier on Islay. In other words, in order to establish their place, they're up against, of course, O'Moore and Kalila, Lefroy, Lagavulin,
Ardbeg.
and so they had amazing competition, and so they become the outlier that sort of has taken on the experimental series within the Islay smoky peaty world.
That's right. And so Bruichladdich is a huge advocate of what's called terroir. And what that means is whiskey and spirit can be affected by not just the cask that it's matured in, but the location that the cask is matured in, the location that the whiskey is distilled in, the farm that the barley was grown on, not even the farm, but the field that barley was grown on, the weather, the microclimates, the soil, everything. And so when they make their whiskeys, they're all about transparency, and they like to give their consumers as much information as possible when it comes to where their whiskey came from. The Octomore super heavily peated expression is grown on, or is named after a farm on Islay called Octomore Farm. And I think the 0.3s of the Octomore are 100% Islay barley. This particular one is 0.4, and I think it's the first year they've come out with a 0.4. And the 0.4 is Virgin Oak. This is the youngest whiskey they've ever put out. It is only a 3-year-old whiskey. And as far as peat phenols go, it's probably the lowest for the Octomores they put out as well, at 88 ppm. And like most people probably don't really understand what that means, but to give you a matter of reference, some of the Octomores they've put out have been up to like 267 ppm or something like that. So when they first came out with this one this year, the 10.4, a lot of Octomore fans were sort of up in arms because of the young age and the low ppm. But then they were all very quickly silenced when they actually had a chance to taste this whiskey. I don't normally rave or gush over a whiskey, if you will, but this particular whiskey is phenomenal, and the fact that it's a 3-year-old whiskey is just mind-blowing. It has been 100% matured for 3 years in French Limousin oak, and the beautiful, well-balanced nature of smoke, like just like the beautiful balance of smoke and oak in this whiskey is just out of this world. You see the color, 3-year-old whiskey. You can see that there.
It's gorgeous. It's like mahogany, rich, very rich.
Dark,
looking.
dark.
Yes. And with the smoke and the campfire in front of us, it's a beautiful blend between the campfire and the nose. Medicinal.
It's one of those whiskeys I could nose it for days. It's such a lovely, sweet, smoked, salt, meat. Everything in one little dram right here.
It has some familiarity with other Islay whiskeys. There's a bit of iodine. The nose reminds me of that I left my socks out again last night, and a bit of a burning hospital, but it's beautiful because it's so soft. It's not harsh like some can be, especially those that are those that have drawn in the iodine within the seaweed that is part of the peat.
That's right.
Of
So
Islay.
the peat they use is harvested on Islay. The barley they use is grown on Islay, or actually in this one I think it's 100% in Scotland. So it's not necessarily Islay barley, but it's 100% Scottish barley. It's 100% matured on the Isle of Islay, which I think gets overlooked a lot of times. A lot of these companies are owned by larger conglomerates, and although it is distilled on the Isle of Islay, that spirit is matured in warehouses near Glasgow or Edinburgh or wherever, and not necessarily matured on Islay. And a big part of the maturation process is the exposure to that terroir, to where that whiskey is from, whether it be on an island exposed to those Scottish storms, the salt water in the air, all of that. So this particular whiskey is a true Islay gem.
That
And
it is.
even now that I've had this whiskey a number of times, it just blows my mind that a 3-year-old whiskey can be this good. It's just phenomenal. And I love the fact that they're willing to state that it's a 3-year-old whiskey. They're not ashamed of it. They're all about. I went to a Bruichladdich Masters class at the Victoria Whiskey Festival back in January. It was an awesome class. If you ever get a chance to go to a Bruichladdich Masters class, super fun. And they're all about taking the pretentiousness out of whiskey drinking, and basically like throwing the big FU up to all those snobs that like to, shit all over new whiskey drinkers that are just discovering for the first time. If you like it, drink it. That's what they're all about. And so I raise a glass to Bruichladdich for this particular dram for sure.
I just got a beautiful taste of lemon. It came like a thread all the way through the taste. The one thing about tasting, it's not about the taste itself, it's about the memory that it launches. And for me, there's something about polishing a table with lemon wax.
Or an old church pew.
Or an old church pew, yes. It is beautiful.
But such a
What a treat.
huge finish. The peat smoke just lingers for days. It's one of those peats, like one of those whiskeys where you'll drink it and then you'll wake up and go to work the next day, and all of a sudden you'll be like, you'll start sniffing your armpits or something because you swear you smell whiskey, you smell peat. It just lasts forever. It's fantastic. This is one hell of an isolation dram right here.
Good
I
for
get-
you.
The second time I nose it, I get smoked cured meat, pork, bacon. So that's the salinity. and the peat.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's been quite a morning.
And the other thing that is fascinating about this whiskey is not only is it only a 3-year-old whiskey, but it's bottled at 63.5% ABV. And normally it takes a lot of effort. Well, not normally, but sometimes it takes a lot of effort to drink a whiskey that high, that cask strength. And this one you would never guess it.
No.
I shared this whiskey with the owner of Shelter Point Distillery not long ago, and didn't tell him what it was. And I asked him what he thought the ABV was, and he guessed it at being maybe 46.
Yeah.
And then I asked him what age he thought it was, and he thought it was maybe a 12 to 18, or I think he said maybe 15 to 18-year-old whiskey. And then when I told him it was a 3-year-old Virgin Oak at 63.5%, he almost fell over. He couldn't believe it. So when you ask me about ratings and recommendations, I would say don't just, if you happen to stumble across this whiskey, buy it. I would say actively pursue this whiskey if you can find it. Yeah, it's a little on the higher end of the price range. Octomore tends to be a little more expensive. It's one of those whiskeys that sort of developed a bit of a cult following, but you got to try it. And even if you're not a huge peat fan, I think you should experience it, because it might be one of those whiskeys that just sort of changes your mind.
I say congratulations to Brooke Loudy for giving us something as young as this whiskey is, and allowing us to realize how significant a young whiskey can be if it's done right.
That's right. You can't. It just takes that whole age statement stigma and just knocks it right out of the park. Like
Solange Shiva.
Solange.